Sometimes camp can start to drag even a few days into it. There's not a whole lot of news. And until the preseason games start, like, what are you actually even watching? Decidedly not the case because Nick Caserio is at the helm. And one of the biggest question marks about this defense being able to maintain or build on its level of dominance that it had last year was you've lost a couple of valuable backup defensive ends, guys in DeMeco Autry and Derek Barnett that played a lot, had a lot of production. Barnett's had 5 sacks in each of the last 2 seasons. And then lo and behold, on a Sunday when nothing else is going on, they go out and reportedly are going to sign Jadeveon Clowney back into the mix. It's the Believe in Texans podcast brought to you by FanDuel, where right now the Texans have a win total on the season of 9.5. I feel even better about obliterating that win total now that Jadeveon Clowney is here. As of right now, it's a report. Never mind the fact that Logan Hall, who had been wearing number 90, is now wearing number 96. So it's Clowney's coming back, and it's just a matter of all the technicalities and formalities. Here's DeMeco when asked the question by Landry Locker about the report that Jadeveon Clowney is coming back.
Along those lines, Clowney, the report that he's going to be here, what does he bring?
It's a report?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear about that. Oh, we'll see what he brings. Even though everybody knows Clowney was first pick overall here in Houston, and he's been a successful player, had a successful career, he brings a physical aspect to the football game, right, to our defense, a guy who can get after the passer as well. So we'll try to get him in, get him acclimated to what we're doing, and he'll be up to speed, off and running.
Yeah, the report that he's coming back. DeMeco wouldn't have talked about it if I don't think if it wasn't pretty much a done deal. 1 year, up to $8 million, so very affordable. It continues the trend of Clowney spending 1 year at a place. He's been now on 5 teams in the last 5 seasons. We'll get into that in a little bit, but really just the production, which with Clowney is always a little bit, you gotta parse through it a little bit because his sack production is never all that impressive. He still has yet to have double-digit sacks in his NFL career. He's been at 9 or 9.5 a bunch of times, but like last year led the Cowboys in sacks, ended up having 12 tackles for loss, and that's where the physicality part comes into it. He makes a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. When he's not making plays, he holds up the edge. He sets the edge in the run game, and he does everything that this defense really, they understand the importance of first down. Everybody talks about getting to third down, but really it's all right, limiting the runs or any kind of explosives on first down goes a long, long way towards killing a series. And when you want to get Will Anderson or Danielle Hunter a blow, I like the idea of Jadeveon Clowney being down in there on first and second down a lot more than pretty much any of the alternatives right now. The 1 year, $5 million plus incentives or $5.5 million plus incentives. That's incredibly affordable for the production that you should expect him to get. He's 33 years old, but he's been pretty damn durable. If you think about going back to when Clowney was young and he had that knee injury and there was a report that he had a microfracture with it, people were starting to wonder, oh my gosh, is he never going to play again? Microfracture. It was a scary word back then, and he's been just fine. It's just that he, as a younger player, he didn't necessarily jibe well with Bill O'Brien. And that's all there was to it. I think he's talked about how he's matured over the years. It was never a question about his effort on the field. It was more, I think, at least reportedly with Bill O'Brien, exactly how professional was he inside the building, et cetera, et cetera. And I think he's been gone a long time. I'm not worried about that stuff at all. And I think that DeMeco and Caserio have done a good job of identifying guys who are going to fit the culture. If they don't fit the culture, they get rid of them right away. But with Clowney, he's not like a CJ Gardner-Johnson where the reports about any issues have been CJ Gardner-Johnson. Like, I don't even want to bring it up, like, in case it's misquoted or taken out of context and I'm saying something about Jadeveon Clowney that would sound about the reports like CJ Gardner-Johnson. He's not a cancerous guy or anything. I think he was a guy that had to grow up and mature in some ways, but's now played in a variety of schemes, and I think he'll fit into this scheme really, really well. The 3 underrated things that I would say about him when people talk about Clowney, I think as we touched on, as DeMeco brought up his physicality, he is incredibly physical versus the run. And I would add to that just his physical impressiveness by way of his length. He covers so much ground so quickly. So on runs on the inside, he just gets down the line of scrimmage. He makes a lot of runs on some of those plays where the defensive end is unblocked by design. You got to be really careful as an offensive coordinator doing that against Clowney, because he will screw up that whole damn design and he'll chase stuff from the backside and make those plays. The pass rush is the classic case of, okay, don't judge a guy completely by his sack totals. He gets pressure on the quarterback really consistently. And actually the rate at which he did it last year was the highest it's been in a long time, because he didn't end up playing that many total snaps, but had really good numbers in terms of pressures, sacks, etc. And some of that's just because he's a little bit stiffer at the top of his rush. He doesn't have that great elite bend that some of the guys who get double-digit sacks every year do, but he's still affecting the quarterback. He's still creating pressures. He's still causing interceptions and incompletions and all of that. And then the third thing is simply that he is very underrated in his swarminess. So when we talk about DeMeco wanting swarm type of players, Clowney has always had a really good motor. And because of the narrative on him coming out of college, I think people are reluctant to acknowledge it, or they just flat out can't see it. But he runs sideline to sideline. He tracks wide receivers 20 and 30 yards downfield to get them. And that part of it, I think he's gonna fit right in. And it'll be fun to watch him and Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter trade and compare notes, as well as the other veteran defensive linemen they have, because they went out and re-signed Mario Edwards as well. Here's DeMeco Ryans on defensive tackle Mario Edwards.
We know what Mario brings. Mario brings unmatched intensity, fire, passion for football. He's made a lot of plays for us, played a lot for us, a guy you can count on. So anytime we can keep our guys around, it's always a good day for us. So Mario rolled right back in, fit right in today. He's off and rolling. So we're excited to get him back, to continue to add depth to our defensive line.
Yeah, I think one of the under-discussed elements about the end of last year and on into the playoffs was just how banged up the Texans were at defensive tackle. By the time at the end of the year, they had to bring in Naquan Jones. They had to bring in the other fellow whose name eludes me right now. But Mario Edwards and Sheldon Rankins and Tim Settle, and not to mention Kurt Heinisch, there were just so many injuries at defensive tackle. And when they brought Mario Edwards in, I thought, okay, that's cool. But, man, you guys already had Sheldon Rankins and Tommy Togiai and Kaden McDonald and Logan Hall. But I think that just like it is on the offensive line, you just never know how many defensive tackles you're going to need. They're going to be super, super deep right there, to the point where they have they're going into the 3 deep of guys who could be starters on other NFL teams. So that part I feel really good about. There's some guys on this team that are good players that are going to either get released or traded at the end of training camp. But that part of bringing the guys back into the fold, like they've done with Sheldon Rankins and, Jadeveon Clowney, even though he wasn't here with DeMeco as a coach, that part I feel really good about. And it really does. It fills in one blank spot and one potential weakness that this defense had that I just don't worry about right now. Maybe you're worried about finding a quality candidate for a job you're posting. You want to find somebody that goes the extra mile. We have somebody that works at our company, Erin, who always goes the extra mile. If she wasn't already working for this company, I would hire her away in a heartbeat to work for this company. But she's already here, and you can't have her. Keep your greasy mitts off of her. But at ZipRecruiter, they make it easy for somebody to take that extra step and show you why they're interested in your job on ZipRecruiter. It is a way to stand out from the others. And right now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. ZipRecruiter has a powerful matching technology that finds candidates quickly, and candidates can tell you in their own words why they're interested in your job. So try ZipRecruiter and make great candidates who will go the extra step for your job. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. You don't have to wait, my friend. Try it for free today at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. That's ZipRecruiter.com/audio. It's ZipRecruiter. Meet your match on ZipRecruiter. So let's get down to practice today. And then I want to talk about a few of the rookies that some of you guys have asked about. But practice today. First day in pads. Always an exciting time in a young man's life, especially the rookies. And I would say, as you might expect, looked like the defense got the better of the offense. Here's the difference. The offense so far, before the pads came on, and including in today, they've landed their punches. They look more competent. I know I keep saying this, and it's probably going to get boring because what do you really know until the regular season comes along? Right now, CJ's plus 5,000 to win the MVP. Is that going to escalate at some point after some of the combined practices or the preseason? But plus 5,000 on FanDuel to win the MVP. And it makes sense given the way that last season, the postseason ended. But I think there's a few things to be excited about or encouraged by. And one is the overall play of the offensive line. I know every time there's a sack in practice, everybody soils themselves and social media is a mess and it's just Chicken Little all over the place. This defense is going to get theirs. They flat out are. It doesn't matter whether it's the Texans offense, if they were out there versus the Rams offense, whoever it might be, it doesn't matter. This defense is going to get theirs. So when the offense gives up a sack or a tackle for a loss, or if CJ throws a pick like he did to Kalen Bullock today, I'm not overly worried about it. I'm not going to wring my hands and stay up at night thinking about it because compared to last year at this time, I didn't think the Texans offense looked as good and as functional and competent as they do right now. The offensive line, when they do get beat, they're guys getting beat physically, which is cool. It's going to happen against guys like Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter. What you're not seeing is guys just flat out busting assignments and unearned tackles, basically. Defensive linemen or linebackers getting unearned tackles for a loss wholesale, the way we saw last year. This is Nico Collins talking about the difficulty of facing that defense every day.
Nah, you just got to keep positive pace, man. Defense, they send them blitzes, and the offense, we got to see it. We got to react, hot routes and things like that. As an offense, we got to adapt to it, and defense, they can continue to do what they do. So we got to, in order to get better on that, we got to find the voids, the hot routes, identify the safeties, pre-snap reads. A lot coming to it. The defense, they're the best now. And so it's only right. It's what you want as offense. You want to go against the best every single day, and it's no better feeling than this, going against them every single day, sharpening the blade, man. So on Sundays, we humming, So the day 4, it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be hot. That's the point of count, man. That's what makes it fun.
So if we're going to talk about today's practice, and, I go through and I've got my own notes, and today I was watching the offensive and defensive line as much as I could, especially the guys on the interior. And that's sometimes a futile battle because it's hard to see those guys, but I wanted to look at Kaden McDonald, and we'll talk about him in a bit. But I think the thing that I'm most encouraged by is some of these runs, even though when you see it written up on somebody's practice report, it doesn't seem necessarily all that impressive. If I go through just what the number one offense did today in terms of runs, there was a David Montgomery run for 2 yards. There was a Woody Marks 1 yard run. That was in the third series. Sorry, so I'll go front to back then. Then in the second series earlier, we had a David Montgomery run for 5 yards. In the first series, David Montgomery runs for 3 yards, and then CJ had a couple scrambles in here. Then there was a Woody Marks run for 20 yards, and that was impressive. These Montgomery runs, look, I'm a guy that when I watch practice, and it's not tackle football, obviously, but you're wearing pads, usually I will favor or be biased towards the defense, and you can understand why. I was a defensive player, but usually I'll say, okay, 3 yards past the line of scrimmage, David Montgomery probably would have gotten tackled by this guy or that guy. It's different when you're watching and running backs are hitting their cuts and getting downhill at full speed, because then it's not so easy to say, that probably would have been a tackle. And I think on that David Montgomery 5 yard run that happened in the second series, I actually honestly think that was probably at the very least going to be one broken tackle, and it would have been longer than 5 yards. When I watched David Montgomery from the end zone and in pads today, my first thought, honestly, instead of that probably would have been a tackle right there, I was watching it and thinking I've got no desire to play this game anymore. I do not want to tackle that locomotive. He runs so freaking hard, and there were some good collisions. It was good stuff. There was some good physical play and some competitive play out there. CJ to Nico for 6 yards. He hit one to Schultz. He had a couple receptions to Schultz today. It was the pick to Kaylen Bullock, and then there was a sack by Will Anderson at one point. He got Braden Smith pretty good. Got a sack of Stroud. That's the ones that make it feel a little bit demoralizing. And it doesn't seem like the run game was, really, really clicking other than that 20-yard run. Look, it's better. The run blocking, I think the running backs themselves, the way that David Montgomery looks right now compared to the way Nick Chubb looked last year in training camp, where, man, the first few weeks of training camp, we're just kind of waiting to see what exactly Nick Chubb still has. And, he did an admirable job of just doing whatever he could do last year. But David Montgomery has a lot more juice. And Woody Marks, it feels like he's taken that proverbial leap in his second year where he's just starting to see the game a lot better. Jaden Higgins is the other second-year player that I've been very encouraged by. I think all of the things that you have to do in this offense where you're making sight adjustments, where you've got to recognize blitz, you really got to read coverages. He talked about it at the podium today, that it was a process last year of really getting comfortable in that. And that now that he's comfortable in the offense, that he feels like he can play a lot faster. Less thinking means playing faster, and that's always a good thing. One more note that I'd add from the practice today is that CJ a couple times had to pull the ball down and had to scramble, but it was because there was nobody open. And this is what I found maybe most encouraging. And again, maybe my expectations are too meager, but there were times where the protection was good. He was in a clean pocket, and then he fled the pocket because there was nobody open downfield. And the play where he had to scramble for a touchdown, it felt like that to me. Try to be honest about the fact, when a quarterback scrambles, okay, would it have been a sack in the backfield? And I don't think it was. It was a nice, clean pocket. And eventually, from my vantage point, he ended up just pulling the ball down, running for a touchdown, and that was the right thing to do. He ran down into the corner of the end zone. I don't think there would have been a collision for him to have to make it down there. And that part of it, like he's being honest with his reads. And against this defense, again, there's going to be times where there is just no good read. Nico has been battling with those two starting cornerbacks with Lassiter and Stingley, and it's been really cool to watch. But that part of it, if it's an indication that, man, at the very least, he's got some clean pockets that because of the clock in his head, he has to flee the pocket. That's a lot different than last year during training camp where the offense just couldn't get a snap off. I mean, last year there was somebody in the backfield so quick every single play that it was very frustrating to watch. Remember, I started wondering if maybe the Texans should be going against the second team defense. I thought the Texans starting offense should be going against the second team defense just so they can finish a play so you can get some quality reps. And it hasn't felt that way this year. When it comes to the rookies, because I know you guys have a lot of questions about the rookies, as you should. I'll go through the draft picks, but first, before I bring any of them up, I want to mention Noah Whittington, the running back out of Oregon. I like this kid, man. If you go watch his college highlights, he's tough and he breaks tackles. And I think he's faster than whatever his combine or pro day workouts might indicate, but he's out there competing. And he was the one who was involved in the fight today that started with Whittington getting close to the goal line, and when Wade Woodaz wrapped him up, Whittington kept going, and then Woodaz, probably, as Jonathan Alexander said, probably a little bit excessive. He picked up Whittington and slammed him to the ground. There's no little bit of it's excessive, and it started a potential scrum or a brawl. But it was all cooler heads prevailed. DeMeco talked about that afterwards. But I thought it was really competitive. If we go through the Texans draft picks, obviously Rutledge is going to be the guy who's most scrutinized and has the highest expectations. They've been playing him at center. They've been playing him at guard. I've seen him do a lot of good things. I've seen him have rookie type moments. Today, it was hard to isolate in and see just him without the benefit of looking from above. But I could see on a couple of the runs that the interior offensive line had things blocked up real well. This defense, it's hard to run outside zone against this defense just because the defensive ends crash down and shut out the outside runs so much that when a running back cuts back, there's somebody waiting for him. So that's where, when we talked earlier about David Montgomery and how he runs and how it looked, I think some of these 3 or 4 or 5 yard runs, I'm watching it and thinking about, okay, if you're running this against a different style of front, a different defense, not necessarily a weaker defense, just a different style of front, does everybody have a hat on a hat? Is it blocked up the way it's supposed to? And yes, so that, again, is light years ahead of where they were last year. We heard a whole lot of DeMeco last year talking about getting a hat on a hat, being sure that everybody's covered up and getting on their assignments and putting a body on a body. I think Keylan Rutledge has done a good job of that by and large. Right now, for him, it's really a lot of just the muscle memory of snapping the football, learning to play center. I think he's competing simultaneously for either a center or a guard spot. And who knows what it'll shape up to look like at this point. Kaden McDonald. Kaden is a fun one because today, the first time I was able to see him out there in a team drill, he popped up out of his stance and his pad level was way too high. And then he tried to swim move as he was already too high. And that is a classic thing that rookies do before they have it beat out of them, basically, by getting gored or upended. The really encouraging thing was that the next time I saw him out there, he'd lowered his pad level and he had a really nice rep, stood up the guard. I believe it was Febechi-Wiwu, but I'm not 100% positive, and shed the guard and made a tackle, or either for no gain or a tackle for a loss. It looked exactly like the type of play you're hoping to get out of Kaden McDonald. So that part is really good. He's been really working hard at his hand placement and his pad level. You see him working with Naquan Jones over in the corner a lot. So far, his work ethic looks like it's exactly where you want it to be. And by virtue of the few plays that I watched him today, I saw him anchor down versus a combo block pretty well. It's really just going to be a matter of just learning to play a little bit lower of a pad level. And this is typically when rookies have to learn that lesson. It doesn't get exposed when you're in no pads, and it certainly doesn't get exposed in college when you're more physically dominant than everybody. So how quickly guys like Kaden McDonald can really learn to lower their pad level, use their hands very precisely. So far, so good. It was a nice sign out of him. Marlin Klein, I think I've been very encouraged by. I did not notice him today. And yet, at the same time, I was focused on the actual line. When I'm watching the offensive and defensive line, sometimes I don't have a clue what happened. There might have been somebody could have streaked the field in the middle of the play, and I wouldn't notice at all because I'm just trying to zero in on those guys. But for the sum total of training camp, I see exactly why they drafted Marlin Klein. It makes a lot of sense. I know there was a lot of scrutiny and criticism of that pick, but he's a big guy. He's got a great catch radius, seems to have a knack for getting open, even though he's doing it mostly against the 2s and 3s. But I'm encouraged by him so far. Febechi-Wiwu, I would put into that same boat as Kaden McDonald. His size and his strength is his calling card. What I've seen from him so far is that, yeah, there's some potential there. I got to watch him in pads more to really get a feel for it and see it. But I think in terms of some of the positive plays that they've had when they're out there with the 2s and the 3s, Febechi-Wiwu has been a part of that quite a few times. The final 3 draft picks, Wade Woodaz, Kamari Ramsey, and Aiden Fisher. Woodaz and Fisher, I've both noticed at times. I think Woodaz more so, and maybe I'm watching him more closely when he gets some reps with the higher groups at times than Aiden Fisher. But I'm gonna reserve judgment on those guys until I can see it in pads. It's another big part of those guys is that tough to tell exactly, when guys aren't thudding up. The other draft pick, though, where Lewis Bond, for some reason, is not on this list that I have, which is an insult because Lewis Bond might be the guy that I'm most excited about from the lower draft picks. So Lewis Bond, why the hell is he not on this list? All right, so Lewis Bond. I'm really intrigued by Lewis Bond, and I think that one of the biggest tests for a slot receiver is, as a rookie, is how quickly do you learn the offense, understand everything they're asking you to do, and then execute. And I think so far he's looked pretty polished by rookie slot receiver standards. It's always slot receivers tend to look way better in camp than they do when things get real in the regular season. But he's from Iowa State, and we know how much they love guys he's not from Iowa State. He's from the other pipeline, which is Bill O'Brien. Boston College is not a pipeline, but the Bill O'Brien relationship, I'm guessing, was a big part of the Texans feeling comfortable with him. And he's got some familiarity with concepts and terminology and everything else that Bill O'Brien is doing in his defense that's similar to where Nick Caley was raised up in, et cetera, with this New England Patriots offense. But Lewis Bond has made some nice tight window catches. and CJ's targeted him at times. He's going to have some more opportunities to get work there in the slot without Jalen Knoll. Jalen Knoll is a quick update for those of you who haven't heard me talk about him. It's a very small bandage on his hand, and he's off to the side doing work that makes he looks precisely like a guy that is what you're hoping to get out of him. Just strong as hell, fast, but it's all doing agility drills and stuff right now until that finger comes back. Caserio had said it'd probably be a few weeks with him, which is unfortunate, but as long as it's just a finger, and it feels like one of those scenarios where you're hoping it's a broken bone, because broken bones, at least you set them and then they heal and then you're done with it. Whereas ligaments can get a little bit dicier, especially with a wide receiver. So first day of pads, I thought was a success. The defense got the better of the offense by and large, but I thought the offense landed some punches. And I eagerly await the appearance of Jadeveon Clowney on the football field. Didn't see him today. He's got to drive in from Katy or wherever he lives now. If you have not liked or subscribed, please do. It helps other Texans fans find the Believe in Texans community. And as always, I appreciate you guys spending your time with me. Everybody have a great day.